Good morning to all our loyal listeners. Today, we are going to discuss several topics which are the plot of the following films: The Island, GATTACA, and My Sister's Keeper, such as mutation and genetical modifications. Is modifying someone genetically an ethical thing to do? Can one create a clone of oneself in order to be cured when you're sick?
Firstly, we are going to talk about the film The Island. In this film, a group of humans are trapped in a huge building which they cannot leave because outside this installation the whole world is contaminated and they are the only survivors, but there is an island which is the only place left pathogen free. That's why there are some elections where they randomly select people to go and have a better life in the island. However, said island does not exist, and all the humans there are clones of real people, which pay for a clone of themselves to be made so they can have babies or for organ transplants, reducing the possibilities of organ rejection, amongst many things. If someone wants a baby, once the clone mother gives birth, they kill her and the island is just an excuse to use the clones and making them to disappear without anyone noticing. In reality, they are in an old underground military bunker and it is all financed by some very rich sponsors.
That's right. And also, the company has absolute control on what they do, feel, or think. They cannot choose their clothes, what they eat, their job, or even their friends, which is clearly not psychologically health, as they later prove they are real humans. So, if they're humans but not in the traditional way, how do they create them?
They are organic beings created accordingly to the client's age, so they are not born as babies, but they become clones in a few months without the ability to think for themselves. Moreover, when they want to create clones, their excuse for the appearance of new clones is that they are new survivors that they have found, which is obviously fake. The problem is that they are treated as non-humans, and the company tells the clients their clones are like plants, not humans who can walk, talk, and feel.
So, if they're humans, how do they control them?
What they do to control their memory is to implant a common false memory of how Earth became contaminated. They also eliminate their desire for sex, and their cognitive capacities are the same ones as a 15-year-old kid. Furthermore, they give them an objective, the hope of going to the island, and a purpose of having a job and things to do throughout the day, so they don't have the need to question what might really be out there. However, what this company doesn't expect is that there is a random selection of clones who begin to evolve and obtain random memories from their owners, the real humans. They also begin to question things, and when the company sees this, it kills or tries to kill them.
I see. So, the real question is this morally ethical?
In order to answer that, first we have to positionate ourselves in both perspectives. For the company, it is a great way of earning lots of money and also even saving countless lives. Nevertheless, they don't have the right to create humans to then save another without asking for permission to the clone, as they are also humans, despite not having been born the same way as us. For example, if you have a child in vitro, you still consider him your child although he hasn't been conceived to the traditional way. So this is a similar case. You are creating a human. The only thing is that they use modern technology to determine, for example, the age of said human for it to match the customer's age. Also, if they decide to do this, the company should tell their customers what they are really paying for, but they didn't, which shows that deep down they know that what they are doing is not very moral correct.
Those were some interesting thoughts, but now it's time to move on. Next up, we'll be talking about Gattaca, a movie in which society is decided by genes.
Yes, so for this we'll ask Emily a few questions. What does Gattaca, the title of the movie, stand for? What does it have in common with studied genetics?
The title of this movie makes reference to the different nitrogenous bases that form part of nucleotides, which then form the nucleic acids of our DNA. The A stands for adenine, the G for guanine, the C for cytosine, and the T for thymine.
What is a human genome?
The human genome is a DNA sequence that is made of protein codes. These codes dictate structural, metabolic, regulating, enzyme, and signaling functions. In other words, human and cellular morphology and function depend on these proteins and on the interaction webs they form. They contain the basic information necessary to physically create an entire human being. In the movie, this is what they modify in the children's genes to make them perfect.
Now that those points are clear, we would like to discuss with you some moral questions this movie gives way to. During the movie, Vincent and other invalids are cast away because of their imperfect genes, and because of these, they can access high posts. Do you think that one's aptitudes and determination are more important than genes?
We believe that it isn't right to state whether or not a person is good enough just because of their genes, especially because it is something completely out of that person's hands, but in the movie, in that of their parents. The fact that they were brought to life one way or another can't be the means to discriminate them, since it doesn't really assure that the modified people will be morally, intellectually, or physically better than the natural kids. A clear example of this is that Vincent can achieve his dream of being part of GATTACA, that he is able to beat his brother in that swimming race, and that he was intellectually as capable as any of the modified astronauts. In fact, we consider him to be even more worthy of his achievements than his workmates because he suffered the discrimination of that society, the lack of any sort of motivation telling him that he could make it, and only getting laughed at because of his being unrealistic enough to think he could do it. Yet, despite all of this, he fought his way up to the top, finally proving to his brother that the advantage of being modified didn't really mean anything.
Keeping on these lines, do you consider that perfect genes grant people the utmost knowledge?
As for the supposition that perfect genes are equivalent to the utmost knowledge, we disagree with that too. It may be true that modified people have a higher capacity to acquire information, but nobody is born knowing everything. That depends solely on an individual's willingness to learn, on their surroundings while growing up, and on the education one receives. The inequality and injustice of the world make the difference between the knowledgeable and those who aren't greater every day, and that is a reality in our world too, not only in the movie. This obviously isn't fair, but it's the truth. We think that everyone should have access to good education and knowledge just because they are alive, and regardless of their background, their race, or where they're from, but sadly, reality is not so.
Do you think the environment in which one grows up influences how they turn out?
We think it does greatly, given that one's personality and knowledge are built up by what they see, hear, and perceive from the outside. There is no way to deny that. Whether it is fair or not is another question, but we do believe it is so. The type of family, friends, location, environment, political and economic situations, as well as a quality of life, all determine how a person will turn out to be. The way someone is treated and their religious beliefs also influence this a lot. If one has had an easy life and has been in a good environment, especially when growing up, will most likely have a better life and will be less problematic on the long run, given they never had to suffer or do wrong things in order to survive, such as stealing. But if you have had to do those things, it is most likely that you will keep doing them later in life.
It's fair to judge a person by their genes instead of by their achievements.
We believe that it isn't right to state whether or not a person is good enough just because of their genes, especially because it is something that that person did not choose, but their parents did. In the movie, of course. A person's genes don't dictate what they will be able to achieve in their life, how good a person is morally, or how hard a worker they'll be. Therefore, it is not right at all. Just like in real life, the only things people should be judged for are their actions, achievements, and a willingness to be better. In other words, their aptitudes. If someone is good enough, they shouldn't be denied the opportunity to prove themselves or get wherever they want to because of something that only really affects your physical characteristics.
In the New York Times, while promoting the film, a surprising advertisement was shown. The composition showed a photo of a baby along with a menu for genetic improvement provided by GATTACA, a genetic engineering company. This advertisement offered different possibilities depending on what potential clients were willing to pay. They could choose from an above average IQ to certain athletic qualities for future babies. Thousands of people, many of them future parents, clicked on the internet address listed on the ad, only to discover that it was just a movie ad. Would you be able to use genetic engineering to have a baby with better characteristics?
We wouldn't even consider the option of genetically modifying our children because, in the end, how much is that child yours if you designed him in a lab? How can he be your child if he doesn't have your physical or behavioral characteristics because you chose those things off a menu? Can you really call him your own if thousands of other children can be created with the same combination of genetic traits offered? Naturally, everyone is unique in their own way, but if everybody is made from the same, let's say, 50 choices, how similar will all these kids be? Where will the similarities end? And if you're making a child genetically because you want him to be perfect, just imagine there were a problem and the baby had some sort of fault. Would you not call him your own? Would you cast him away because he is not how you wanted him to be? If the answer you think you'd give is no, then why are you designing your child and not leaving it to fate or nature's choice? Why bother to make him in the first place? We wouldn't do it because we consider that part of the magic of having a child is getting to know him, his personality as time goes by and he grows up, seeing what he has in common with us and learning to love those details that are their own, and not knowing directly from the start how he is going to be because we chose it. Part of what makes a family is the convergence of different personalities and likes. If a couple is willing to AI generate their child because they want a perfect offspring, they are probably narcissistic enough to want them to have personalities identical to theirs, in which case what we wanted would no longer be possible. All it would take would be a Google search to have all their traits laid out on the table.
What's your opinion?
Everyone knows it's only human to make mistakes, and that the only non-human thing is to be perfect, so why try to achieve perfection when what makes each one of us unique are those particular defects? Some would even argue that the lack of defects in fact only makes these individuals a carcass of a human, with the right shape and characteristics, but without what really makes us what we are. But then, where would this train of thought lead to? If a world in which such beings existed, and with this mentality, would the opposite of what happens in the movie occur? Would, instead of the invalids, the modified people be cast away and deemed fake? We all agree that genetically modifying these things can prove useful in many ways, yet beneficial, not so much. This is why, if we ever were to have kids in a place the likes of the movie, we would always go for leaving things up to nature or fate, whatever you prefer to call it.
Thank you very much, Emily. Moving on to the final film, we're going to talk about the film My Sister's Keeper. My Sister's Keeper is a film that talks about the medical emancipation of Anne, an 11-year-old girl who was born via in vitro fertilization just to donate her body to her sister, Kate, who has had acute promyelocytic leukemia since she was little, since none of Kate's relatives is compatible. Anne, tired of being a keeper to her sister, demands her mother, who wants her to donate her kidney in order to save Kate's life. The film highlights how advancements in genetics can be used to create life saving treatments for individuals with life threatening diseases. However, it also explores the moral and psychological implications of using genetics to conceive a child for the purpose of medical intervention. It ultimately invites viewers to reflect on the complexities of modern medicine and the impact genetic choices can have on a family.
On making the right choice, do you think she has the right to do so, even below the age established by law?
I think Anne, even being an 11-year-old girl, has the right to control her body. Sometimes we tend to underestimate children's will or their ability to make decisions, especially regarding these serious topics. But Anne seems determined, and in the end, she's been donating her body since she was a newborn. Even below the age established by law, 14 years old in California, the state where the movie was filmed, I think this is such a serious topic and, as said in the movie, it has given Anne multiple consequences, such as hemorrhage or being hospitalized multiple times. I get the fact that she's tired.
Is Mrs. Fitzgerald, Anne's mother, doing the right thing?
I think Mrs. Fitzgerald is being totally unfair to Anne, as she doesn't want to live that way and just live a normal life. She's being selfish and only thinking about saving Kate's life, not realizing that Anne's life may be put at risk. Kidney transplant, for example, tends to be an unconcerning surgery, but donating leukocytes or stem cells may provide hemorrhages, GVHDs, pneumonitis, or organ failure. So, not only Kate's health is at risk due to her leukemia, but Anne's health too.
What is in vitro fertilization and why did Anne got conceived that way?
In vitro fertilization is a term typically for infertility. Mature eggs are collected from ovaries and fertilized by sperm in a lab. Then, a procedure is done to place one or more of the fertilized eggs, called embryos, in a uterus, which is where the babies develop. Anne got conceived that way because her sister needed a donor and none of her relatives were able.
Book the film is based on, the ending changes drastically. Anne wins the case, and on her way back home, she dies from a tragic car accident caused by her mother. This way, her parents can donate her kidney to Kate, who is still alive. Do you think it was right?
That's such a cruel thing, poor Anne. Her mother has no right to kill her younger daughter just to save the older one. Mrs. Fitzgerald's lack of emotional control is seen a lot throughout the film. She is presented as an ambitious person, somebody who always wants victory and doesn't accept arguments contrary to her beliefs. This is shown in the way that she doesn't know how to handle Kate's leukemia, and she rejects any other possible treatments that are not initially established or transplants. So I think that when she didn't win the case, she obviously got mad not only because she knew Kate was going to die, but because of her principles.
Our last question is, do you think it's ethical to have a savior child?
I don't think so, even if it is a common thing nowadays. Children must be brought to the world with love and the intention of living a worthy life and finding their purpose as they live. So, from my point of view, if you have a savior child, they've already got their purpose and their goals in life, and I think it is not something they want to do, sacrifice their lives so as to save others.
That's the end of today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it and see you next day.